The judge was laughing at her. The entire courtroom was laughing at her. 17-year-old Zariah Cole stood at the defense table in an oversized orange jumpsuit, wrists trembling, 2 days before Christmas. No lawyer, no family in the gallery. Just her and a judge who had already decided she was guilty of being young, black, and mouthy. Judge Barkley cracked jokes about YouTube law degrees. He questioned her intelligence. He told her to just plead and get this over with instead of pretending to be a lawyer. The gallery chuckled nervously. The prosecutor smirked. The court reporter barely looked up. What none of them knew, what Judge Barkley was about to learn the hard way, was that this mouthy teenager was about to give a legal performance that would silence every person in that room. If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look or how old you are, this story is for you. Drop a comment and let me know, have you ever had to prove someone wrong? Let's rewind to how Zariah ended up in that courtroom. 3 weeks earlier, she was driving home from her shift at a grocery store when red and blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror. Routine traffic stop. Broken taillight. She pulled over, handed the officer her license and registration, polite and cooperative. Then things escalated. The officer asked to search her backpack in the passenger seat. Zariah hesitated. She asked a simple question. Do you have probable cause to search my belongings? That question changed everything. Within minutes, backup arrived. The officer claimed she was acting suspiciously. They searched the bag anyway, found nothing illegal, just textbooks and her work uniform, but they arrested her for obstruction of justice. The charge? Questioning the search. Interfering with an investigation. Being difficult. Fast forward to the preliminary hearing. Her overworked public defender filed a last-minute motion to withdraw. Something about caseload, conflicts, bureaucratic nonsense. Zariah showed up to court alone, facing a misdemeanor that could derail her college applications, her future, everything. Judge Barkley didn't hide his contempt. He looked at her over his glasses with a smirk that said he'd seen 1,000 kids like her. Disrespectful. Entitled. Thinking they knew better than the system. So you're representing yourself? He asked, voice dripping with sarcasm. Yes, Your Honor. Watched a few episodes of Law and Order, did we? The gallery laughed. The prosecutor grinned. Zariah's wrists trembled at the defense table. But it wasn't fear making her shake. It was restraint. Because what Judge Barkley didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was who Zariah Cole really was. Here's what the judge missed. Zariah Cole had been preparing for this moment her entire life. At 13 years old, while her classmates were on Instagram and TikTok, Zariah was sneaking into public courtrooms downtown. She'd sit in the back row with a composition notebook, scribbling down case citations, objections, trial strategies. She studied the rhythm of oral arguments like other kids studied song lyrics. Her friends thought she was weird. Teachers told her to be a kid. But Zariah had a reason. Her grandfather, a man named Vernon Cole, a male clerk who spent 40 years sorting letters in a federal building. Vernon had dreamed of going to law school, of standing in a courtroom and fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. But he grew up poor in rural Georgia in the 1960s. No money, no connections. Just a dream he carried until the day he died. Before he passed, Vernon left Zariah 2 things: a stack of worn-out legal dictionaries with cracked spines and highlighted pages, and a promise whispered on his deathbed. Learn this, baby girl. Learn this, and no one will ever talk over you again. So she learned. She watched appellate arguments on YouTube like they were Netflix series. She memorized Supreme Court decisions. She studied the Fourth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, precedent cases on unlawful search and seizure. She taught herself legal writing, courtroom procedure, objection protocols. By 17, Zariah Cole knew more about criminal procedure than some first-year law students. But no one saw it. Not her teachers. Not the officer who arrested her. And definitely not Judge Barkley, who looked at her and saw just another troubled teen who didn't know her place. This wasn't about winning a case for Zariah. This was about honoring a man who never got his shot. This was about proving that Vernon Cole's dream didn't die with him. It lived in her. Have you ever had someone believe in you even when the world didn't? Someone whose faith kept you going? Hit that like button if this resonates with you. Judge Barkley sighed dramatically. All right, Miss Cole. Since you insist on wasting the court's time, go ahead. Say your piece. Make it quick. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. The prosecutor shuffled papers, barely paying attention. The courtroom settled into bored silence. And then Zariah Cole became someone else entirely. She straightened her posture, lifted her chin. When she spoke, her voice was clear, steady, and devastatingly precise. Your Honor, I move to dismiss the obstruction charge on 3 grounds: lack of probable cause, constitutional protection of speech, and procedural violations in the arresting officer's report. The judge blinked. Zariah didn't wait for permission. She continued. Under Georgia Code Title October 16, 24, obstruction of an officer requires physical interference or knowingly and willfully hindering law enforcement. Verbal questioning does not meet this standard. The officer's own body cam transcript, Exhibit C in the case file, shows I complied with all lawful orders. I provided my license. I exited the vehicle when asked. I did not physically resist. The prosecutor's head snapped up. What I did, Zariah continued, was ask a constitutionally protected question under the Fourth Amendment. In Heian v. North Carolina, the Supreme Court held that an officer's search must be justified by reasonable suspicion or probable cause. The officer in my case cited suspicious behavior as justification, but the body cam shows no articulable facts supporting that claim. I asked a legal question. That is not obstruction. That is exercising my rights. Judge Barkley sat forward. Zariah pulled a folded document from her pocket, notes she'd written in her cell the night before. Furthermore, the 11th Circuit ruled in United States v. Perkins that pretextual stops must still meet constitutional standards. The officer pulled me over for a broken taillight but immediately pivoted to searching personal belongings unrelated to the traffic violation. This is a textbook pretextual search, which Rodriguez v. United States explicitly prohibits without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. The court reporter stopped typing. Just stopped. Stared. Zariah wasn't done. Your Honor, I'd also like to address discrepancies in the officer's incident report. The report claims I raised my voice and became agitated. The body cam audio, timestamp 6:42, shows I spoke calmly and never raised my voice. The report claims I refused to comply with orders. The video shows I complied immediately. These inconsistencies undermine the credibility of the obstruction charge. She paused, looked directly at the judge. I'm not here to disrespect this court. I'm here because the law is supposed to protect everyone, even 17-year-olds in orange jumpsuits. If questioning a search is obstruction, then the Fourth Amendment means nothing. And if that's the standard we're setting, then we're not upholding justice. We're silencing it. The courtroom was dead silent. No one laughed now. No one smirked. Judge Barkley stared at her, mouth slightly open, like he'd just watched a magic trick he couldn't explain. The prosecutor stood abruptly. Your Honor, may we have a brief recess? The judge nodded slowly, still staring at Zariah. 10 minutes. The gavel cracked. Zariah sat down, heart pounding, hands still shaking. But this time, it wasn't from restraint. It was adrenaline. She'd just done what her grandfather never got the chance to do. She'd made them listen. 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. Zariah sat alone at the defense table while the prosecutor huddled with 2 colleagues in the hallway. Through the glass doors, she could see them, pointing at documents, shaking their heads, clearly rattled. Judge Barkley had disappeared into his chambers. The courtroom slowly filled back up. Zariah noticed something different now. People weren't laughing anymore. A few spectators whispered to each other, glancing her way. One older black woman in the second row gave her a subtle nod. The bailiff returned. All rise. Judge Barkley re-entered, but he moved differently now. Slower. More careful. He sat down and adjusted his glasses, avoiding eye contact with Zariah. The prosecutor stood, cleared his throat. Your Honor, after reviewing the defendant's arguments and consulting the case file, the state moves to dismiss the obstruction charge in the interest of justice. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Zariah's breath caught.
Wait. What?
Judge Barkley nodded slowly. Motion granted. Miss Cole, the charge against you is dismissed. He paused, then added in a voice stripped of all sarcasm. You are free to go. But he wasn't done. Miss Cole, I want to say something. His tone was different now, measured, careful, almost respectful. In 23 years on this bench, I've seen a lot of self-represented defendants. Most don't know what they're doing. But you. He trailed off. You clearly know your way around a courtroom. I hope you pursue this path. Officially. Zariah nodded, too stunned to speak. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. Zariah stood there, motionless, as the room emptied around her. She'd won. Not just the case, she'd won her dignity back. She'd made a judge who mocked her apologize without saying the word sorry. As she gathered her belongings, the folded notes, her grandfather's lucky pen, a woman in a tailored suit approached her. Zariah Cole? Yes. I'm Linda Harmon, senior public defender in this district. I watched your entire argument. She handed Zariah a business card. We have an internship program for high school students interested in law. It's competitive, but I think you'd be perfect. We also have partnerships with scholarship programs for first-generation law students. If you're interested, call me. Zariah stared at the card, eyes burning. I'm interested. Linda smiled. I thought you might be. Merry Christmas, Zariah. Outside the courthouse, the winter air hit Zariah's face like a baptism. She looked up at the gray Atlanta sky, clutching the business card in one hand and her grandfather's pen in the other. If you believe in earned respect and second chances, drop a yes in the comments right now. So what does Zariah's story teach us? First, preparation is the ultimate equalizer. Zariah didn't have money, didn't have a lawyer, didn't have privilege. What she had was knowledge, and she used it like a weapon. When the system tried to silence her, she spoke its language better than the people running it. That's power. Second, your background doesn't define your capability. Zariah grew up without access to fancy private schools or legacy connections. Her grandfather was a male clerk. But he gave her something more valuable than money. He gave her purpose. And she turned that purpose into expertise. The system expected her to fail. It's designed to make people like her feel small. But Zariah refused to shrink. Third, when people underestimate you, use it as fuel. Judge Barkley thought he was dealing with another scared teenager. He laughed at her. And that was his mistake. Because underestimation is a gift, it means they're not ready for what you're about to do. Zariah didn't just defend herself. She educated an entire courtroom. She exposed flaws in the system. She made a prosecutor backpedal and a judge rethink his assumptions. And fourth, legacy isn't just inherited. It's earned and honored. Vernon Cole never became a lawyer. But his granddaughter did what he couldn't. She stood in that courtroom and fought. She carried his dream across the finish line. Zariah didn't just win a case that day. She auditioned for her future. She proved she belonged in spaces that tried to exclude her. And now, because of one moment of courage, she has a pathway to law school, mentorship, and a career fighting for people who look like her. The girl Judge Barkley mocked as a wannabe revealed herself as a genius attorney in disguise, years ahead of schedule. That's what happens when preparation meets opportunity. That's what happens when you refuse to be silenced. 2 days before Christmas, in a crowded Atlanta courtroom, a 17-year-old girl reminded everyone that respect isn't given, it's commanded. Judge Barkley thought he knew who Zariah Cole was. He was wrong. Zariah didn't just walk out of that courtroom with her charges dismissed. She walked out with her dignity intact, her future wide open, and her grandfather's promise fulfilled. Vernon Cole never got to be a lawyer. But his dream didn't die with him. It lived in Zariah. And now, it's going to live in every client she fights for, every case she wins, every courtroom she transforms. This channel is about stories like Zariah's, real people defying the odds. If you want more stories that matter, subscribe, and hit that bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in that courtroom? Because sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one who changes everything.